So good evening, everybody. My name is BB and I'm the Community Experience Coordinator here at Contact. Thank you so much for joining us on tonight's webinar, Getting Started in Photography. I am so pleased to have some experts, some very special guests with me this evening who are going to break it down for us and give us the real about the photography industry. So why don't we start with an introduction? And I'm going to come to you first, Jay.
Okay, put me on the spotlight, yeah. Hi, my name is Sentrosi. I'm a photographer. I'm also an actor and a model and a creative director. And yeah, that's pretty much me keeping it short and sweet.
Wow, what don't you do? I love it. I love it. I love it. Alexis, tell us about you.
So, hi everyone. Thanks for having me today, BB. It's great to be here. My name is Alexis. I'm a photographer. My work is mainly, I specialize in fashion and beauty. Yeah, that's it.
Perfect, perfect. Kizzy?
I'm Kizzy. I'm Kizzy Kalu. I'm a director and photographer, and I act in things and model things sometimes. I just do whatever I want to do, pretty much. That's what I try to do. Yeah, that's it.
I love it. Actually, Kizzy put together a short film recently, didn't you? Which we shared over on contact.discover. If you missed that, so please do check that out. And last but not least, Kirsty.
Hello. I don't think you can see me, but I'm here in voice. I am a Scottish portrait, travel, fashion photographer. I live in London now, and I'm also head of bookings at Contact. In a nutshell.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you guys so much again for taking the time out to join us this evening. Got loads of questions for you. Got loads and loads of questions for you. But actually, my first question is going to be for our audience. So I'm just going to put out a poll. And the poll is very simple. I just want to gauge what sort of experience level we've got in the room today. Are there a load of newbies? Are there people who are more have more experience? Just want to gauge and kind of see who's kind of listening tonight. Okay, so we've got a few that have rated themselves as a 2-star. Love that, love that. So intermediate, they're not newbies, but they have a little bit of experience. I love that. Got a 1-star, got a 3-star. Lovely, lovely. Okay, good. It looks like we've got a nice lovely kind of mix of expertise and experience tonight, and I'm really hoping that our conversation tonight will help to kind of guide people and give them kind of more insight, more information in terms of building out a successful career for themselves. So I guess the first place to start, the best place to start is kind of, why did you decide to go into photography? Kizzy, I want to hear from you first on this.
So I've always liked taking pictures, but I've actually been like a video guy forever, like growing up doing like little stop motion videos and doing all that jazz. But then when I was like during 2020, I had already tons of crazy life stuff happened, but I didn't have any cameras, and then I decided to pick up a film camera and start doing that, just so I had like a creative outlet at the time, because I was just working like a normal job. And then yeah, I took some pictures, and then I was like, okay, let's make this something bigger. And yeah, I wrote it out a lot smarter when I was preparing, but I got put on the spot. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know, it's just grown from there. So does that answer the question? I feel like
it does. It does. It actually sounds. It sounds like a response I got told recently. So I did an IG live with one of our photographers on a platform called Sean, and he literally told me that he stole his brother's camera and he literally just started taking pictures. I think that's a common theme, you know, just picking up the camera and just kind of going with it. Jay, what was your story?
Okay, so I've got a background in acting and modeling, and I got to like my mid to late 20s and actually hit a spell of depression, and it made me have a real reflection of, you know, everything I was doing in my life, my work routine, my lifestyle, my hobbies, my habits. And I realized that I really needed to have a creative outlet and have expressions that I could have creative control over. So yeah, the control was a factor that I was missing when it came to acting and modeling. As an actor and model, I found myself in spaces that, you know, it was with, I couldn't necessarily control where I was going or the people I was working with. But essentially, I found that as a photographer, and I can better manage my time, better manage my work, and my expressions and all of that.
Wow, I love that. Creative control come through. Okay. That explains so much about you, Jay. I can't lie. That explains a lot about you. Alexis, how did you get into photography?
Okay, so quite a long story. When I was little, I always loved fashion magazines, and I kind of felt I want to do something with fashion industry, but I wasn't sure what is it. So I went to uni for graphic design, and I realized that I'm so crap at drawing, like literally. It really upset me. So I was like, I started to create my own briefs, and they were based on photography. I graduated and I started to work in advertising as creative. And after a while, I found myself behind the lens for one of the projects. And I just felt that feeling I had at uni, that enjoyment of freezing the moment and just capturing my vision. And that became my ultimate medium of expressing myself. And it just felt so clear for me that this is what I should do. Then I worked in-house a little bit and I started to feel like I want to go on my own. So I quit. I went freelance. Yeah, pretty much I enjoy it ever since. I love it.
Oh, that's such an amazing story. I love that you came from like the other side of the creative industry, advertising. That's really interesting, you know, way to get into it. And I love that you found your passion and you stuck with it. That's so incredible to hear. Kirsty, now we know you are a Scottish photographer, but why don't you tell us your story?
Thanks, Bibi. Good question. My story. So I guess quite a similar vibe to maybe Kizzy, that when I was younger, I used to just love taking photos. I was just always the one in my friend group when I was at school with my camera on me. And me and my pals, we used to like dress up and make silly videos and put them on YouTube, which are very embarrassing and definitely hidden now. So it was always a bit of a creative outlet. And kind of later teen years, I got a really cool opportunity to go on an expedition all the way to Mongolia, which was really lucky. And I had my camera with me then. And that, I think that was kind of the crux of it. That was when I took so many photos and I came home and I pored over them and I was just completely obsessed. And at that point, I was like, right, I'm going to be a photographer. So went on to study at uni and made some really bad photos at uni. I didn't like particularly love my course, but I made some great friends, like-minded people, and I was reaching out to like a lot of cool creative folk in Edinburgh, and I kind of started my network from there. And yeah, that's my story.
Oh, and a great story that is. Because I'm a bit nosy, I just want to ask you, obviously you study photography, and I've heard that studying photography sometimes is a bit excruciating. It kind of drains the passion out of photography. Was that your experience, or did studying photography enhance your passion for it?
That's so funny to hear. I guess for me, I went to uni at an age where I didn't know much really about photography, so I wasn't particularly established by any means. So that was a really cool opportunity, and I did learn a lot. But it was excruciating is the word. I remember lecturers just being like, "Your work is shit," and I was like, "Okay." So you had to kind of grow a thick skin and get used to things like that. But yeah, overall great experience, but definitely not for everyone.
Wow, I think that feedback aspect is probably the toughest part about photography, which leads me nicely on to the next question I want to pose to you guys, which is, what is the reality of being a photographer that people actually don't know about, don't appreciate? What are the things that you guys have to do behind the scenes whilst we're all oohing and ahhing over the glamorous images that come out at the other end, what's that bit in the middle like? Jay?
Well, there's a few things actually, but the main things for me is when it comes to production and direction, and planning and organization, and all those things fall into that. When I first started out as a photographer, freelancing as a photographer, I kind of like attracted people that hadn't really paid photographers for shoots before, as you do when you're starting out. And sometimes that looked like people messaging me saying, "Hey, what's your rate?" And I'm like, "Hey, what do you want?" And they're like, "Pictures." And I'm like, "Okay, so what do you want these pictures to look like? Do you have any references? Does it need to be indoors in a studio? Do you have a location we can shoot in?" And you know, you find yourself having to communicate a lot and organize a lot and figuring out the elements that you need to be able to create that final product. So I feel like it's an obvious answer, but at the same time, I've discovered there's so many people that don't actually realize how much planning, organization, and production and direction comes into it.
Wow. Kizzy, you were laughing a lot there. Can you relate to what Jay was talking about?
Yeah, I want to add, like, I related to the first when you start about starting, because I'm very much the director type, the creative director. Like, I wanted control, so that's why you mentioned that. But yeah, so that's like, I'm come from a part of the States that's like not a big city place. Like, there's no big city, so I get those messages still to this day constantly. Like, people hit me up, they're like, "Oh, we should take pictures," and I'm like, "Cool." And then the conversation starts, and then the second they had to like think about money, they're like, stop replying, and then it's like whatever. But I think in terms of like the more, I feel like the more important side of that, because I feel like that'll maybe never stop, and it's just kind of like a annoying thing. But like the whole business side of stuff, and like figuring out like not only being like a nice person and being able to like meet people and network that way, but being able to like manage your time and your resources that you're putting into stuff and getting like a return for what you're doing. And that's something I'm just now like figuring out, because it's like been a tricky balance versus like you want to do the best work you've ever done all the time, you know, but you also want to like, I don't know, like you gotta like pay your bills, you know. So I think that's something that like I never thought about, was just like how much you really should pay attention to like, I don't know, I don't like saying pay attention to numbers, but like how much they factor in a lot more than like I'd like to.
Love that. Okay, so keeping on the retrospective theme, Alexis, what's one thing you wish you knew before you went into photography properly?
I think how multidisciplinary this whole photographer role is now. As a whole, you need to be pretty much photographer, retoucher, stylist, set designer, just everything, retoucher, as I said, yeah, color grading, everything is, it's like, I had a situation when a client asked me, "Can you find me some sand?" And this is sort of situation when I'm a photographer, I'm here to take photos, but people expect it all when they book you. A lot of time, they just want you to do it all, which is crazy.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that definitely sounds like a lot. Jay, has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, it has been. I mean, there have been various and many different occasions where, you know, I've had situations where clients have expected me to be able to bring snakes on set and know someone who owns snakes and stuff like that. And that's just a random example, but it is a truthful example. Yeah, I definitely resonate with what Alexis has said. Like I found that clients often expect you to have all the answers, when it's actually down to, you know, budget, rate, their organization, you know, and having that match with the vision that they want. If they don't have the budget or the rate and there's no resources to be able to obtain certain things, then we have to sort of communicate, meet in the middle, and see what we can get out of you know, our resources.
Wow. Whew. Sounds like a lot. I'm getting tired just listening to all that. That's so much responsibility for one person to have to bear. That's just incredible, and that's not what I anticipated the photographer's role would be. So thank you guys for shedding more light on that. Kirsty, I'd love to bring you in here. Because obviously, you know, you've been a photographer for a number of years now. Obviously, you're the head of bookings at Contact. And on our platform, obviously, we have an amazing array of photographers. Just, you know, our photographers that are joining us tonight are a sample of them. What's one thing that you wish that you knew before you started photography?
Ooh, tough one. I think super in line with what the chat has been already. If I could go back, I would teach younger me about kind of like boundaries and how, yeah, like knowing how a client or whoever is hiring you to do something is always going to kind of try and maximize their time with you or their budget or whatever they have. And yeah, in my experience starting out many years ago, I didn't have a clue about boundaries. So I thought, you know, making them happy, giving them everything they wanted was the way to go. And I think if I could go back in time and kind of teach myself some lessons, it would definitely be about boundaries and figuring out where I stand before I go in, so that I go in with, you know, experience and confidence. And I think that's like much more kind of attractive as a professional as well. Whereas, yeah, when I think back of like 19-year-old me and I was just doing everything for hardly any money, and I do regret that a little bit.
Wow. Okay. I love that you mentioned about clients, because I have a question that's been, that I'm very, very curious about. But before I do ask it, I should say that for anyone who's listening, if you do have a question, then please do drop it in the Q&A box. I will be keeping an eye on those, and we'll definitely weave them in and throw them at our audience wherever appropriate. My question about clients, I mean, Kirsty, you hinted at it there already, but how do you guys manage difficult client relations? Because, you know, as Jay alluded to earlier, you know, dealing with clients, dealing with customers, you have to learn to communicate, you have to learn to deal with all sorts of interesting requests, like bringing snakes to set, which is just mind-blowing to me. But yeah, what are your kind of top tips for dealing with difficult clients or managing client relationships?
I'll go ahead. Go on.
Alexis?
Okay, I'm going first. So I think it's all about your attitude. You can't let your emotions just take control. You need to be very professional, very honest. And if you deal with something very difficult, you just need to really listen and try to resolve the issue without this backfiring at you, because of course it's your client, and industry is very connected, and the word of mouth is absolutely a key, like how you get jobs through people. So you need to be very careful how you handle it.
Nice. Okay, Jay?
I was just gonna say, going back to my points of communication, like you can never ask too many questions, and how, you know, before I get into a space of hopefully I don't experience it much going forward, but in the space of like whether a client is difficult or easygoing or good to work with, I usually suss them out from asking them certain questions. Or, you know, if someone was to approach me, email me, whatever, and give me a full-on description and a brief and references, mood boards, and what have you, and the communication's quite clear, even if it is a lot of information to take in at first, I can pretty much suss out that they're going to be a good client to work with based on the fact that I can see they're organized and they thought of everything. It's usually the clients that haven't really thought that much about what they're seeking and what they want from you. And this can boil down to the little things like how many images they want you to edit. I've found in my career it's very crucial just to have an agreement before you have a shoot day as to how many final images, because one person will tell you 20 or 5, And another person will literally turn around and say, oh, I was thinking like 400. And to them, that's normal.
That is a solid piece of advice there, Jay. Definitely try to get things in writing beforehand, just so that, you know, both parties know what to expect, and know what the outcomes of the project like will be, so everyone's on the same page. Kizzy, you were again nodding very furiously there. I saw you in the corner there.
I didn't realize it looked like that. I hate that, but but no, it's true. Like when you start sussing out, that's like, I feel like a major thing, because you can dodge a horrible client just based off those first conversations you have with them. If you know what to look for, like I love to get on calls and just make sure they'll even like match your energy on the project, because so many times I've had it, like you're saying, when they don't have like good answers or any idea, usually they're not ready to start a project. Honestly, I think that's like what it boils down to a lot of the time. Like it's just funny because yeah, Jay kind of like said exactly what I was thinking. Is like you need to kind of get that ahead of time so you don't waste your own time, you know, and like also it keeps you from getting your ego into it too much, because I feel like that's like an issue. It can be an issue as if, because it's like it's easy when it's like your art and your work and your time, like people are going to take advantage of it when they can, and then if you get butt hurt, you know, or like don't act professional, it's only going to do damage to you in the end. So you need to be able to like, I don't know, put it aside as much as possible and do the like protective like measures to make sure it doesn't get down to any situation like that, you know. But yeah, I honestly haven't had that many bad clients at all.
That's good. No more bad clients for the rest of 2023. I love that, guys. I think that's some really solid advice there. We're gonna move on slightly now to talk about the C word. And when I say the C word, I mean competition. Kirsty, I really want to get your take on this. How competitive would you say the photography industry is? Obviously, every photographer has a different style, you know, they edit slightly differently, you know, the shots are going to be, I mean, like I've always said, you know, you could give a photographer the exact same space with the exact same model, but you'll get two different sets of outcomes, right? Because that is the uniqueness of photography. With that being said, though, how competitive do you think the photography industry is? And what are your top tips for standing out from the crowd?
Oh, have I got an echo?
We can hear you.
Yeah, okay, I can hear myself back, so I'm just going to plow through. I think photography, like kind of like any creative field, is notoriously competitive, but I also think it is a lot about what you make it. I remember when I was starting out, I experienced a lot of people kind of keeping their cards close to their chest and not sharing, and that was really isolating experience. And I think as photographers, you work independently quite a lot anyway, so it can be quite lonely, and it did get me down like back in the day. But I think what I've learned is to just kind of give back what you maybe haven't got in the past. So kind of nowadays I love being able to like share what I've learned and mentor people, and you know, pass on jobs and just give that energy out that you might have, you know, missed out on at one stage, because yeah, I believe in that kind of energy exchange, and yeah, making it a positive thing. I think, yeah, the top photographers get there because they obviously have great work, you would think, but surely they're also lovely people, and the people that work with them enjoy it. So I think part of that is being able to be open and like share your experiences and not get too hung up on the competition, basically, from my point of view.
I love that. Good vibes, positive vibes. Absolutely love that. That is Kirsty in a nutshell, to be honest. Alexis, though, I know you do a lot of e-com, and I am assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that clients in the e-com space prefer to work with the same photographers time and time again for consistency, you know, across their platform, etc. Is that true? And if so, does that make the e-com space very competitive for photographers?
I think overall I noticed that industry became more and more competitive. There's more and more photographers leaving in-house jobs, and more photographers leaving uni and going straight to freelance. So there's a lot of competition out there. In terms of the e-com space, I would say yes, definitely. There are some brands, like smaller brands, they would just work with one photographer. And for example, you just do their e-com and creative, or they have different photographer for e-com and creative, but it's about the same lighting, the same angles, the same sort of, once you go to the certain client, you know the style, and they like the fact that they don't need to work with anyone else. So I think there is a big competition in terms of e-commerce, because I have some clients that they work with me a lot. If it's a bigger e-com place, like bigger brands, then they kind of work with a group of photographers, and you kind of exchange. There are some photographers that they would do more work because clients prefer them, and then you get in when there is some space. So yeah, definitely I can agree, very big competition in e-com photography, and it's more and more.
Thank you so much for that, Alexis. So Jake, off the back of that then, what are your top tips for standing out?
Oh, interesting. The only real thing I can like respond to that is just being true to yourself. And going back off what everyone's said, I think it's important to not look at the competition. If you're always looking at other photographers and what they're doing, and like sort of, you know, your ego might get a bit bruised because you think you could have done a better job, or you could have done what they've done, you know, it's not gonna impact you in a positive way. So again, going back to good energy and positivity, I like to always be optimistic, even if I've had spells where I haven't booked a job for a while, which has happened in the past. I'm always very conscious about what I can do for myself and for my work. So you know, if those spells ever come about, and in the past when I was starting out, I made a big effort to test and experiment and explore with photography styles, be it with certain kinds of lighting, certain concepts, mood boarding, all these different elements. As long as you're putting yourself out there and you're actually testing and shooting, I think that's what's going to make you stand out, because it shows that you have innovation, you have creativity, and you're able to create things a little bit outside of the box. I mean, photography is probably more competitive than it's ever been, ever, because of the rise of social media coming out of the pandemic, especially with everyone being online, shopping online more, browsing online, having online entertainment. So yeah, I think it's really important to get out there and just test. I find that I end up getting clients approaching me more for my test shots sometimes than for my actual work.
Wow, okay, interesting. Okay, cool. Speaking more on clients then, how do you guys actually decide which projects to take on? Because that, I mean, Jay, you kind of hinted at it before, you know, by asking a few questions, you can kind of figure out, okay, is this someone serious, or is this someone that's probably going to waste my time? But, you know, how and in what other ways do you guys kind of decide, like what other factors are important to you as photographers in terms of deciding which jobs to take on? Kizzy?
Okay, it's unmuted. Well, in my experience, I kind of approach things a little, I don't know, maybe it's not unique. I don't talk to a lot of photographers enough, so maybe it's not. But like what my Instagram, Jay kind of mentioned like his tests and everything. My Instagram is mostly all tests, and I keep my client work separate. And so it's like what I'm putting out there and what I'm marketing myself as is always going to be true to where I want to be. And then where I'm making my money can be wherever, where I'm learning or getting experience. Because I work part-time mainly as a photographer for a woman's like high heels company. But if you go to my Instagram, there's not a single sign that I do that, you know? And so I don't think there's anything wrong with like taking in clients that aren't necessarily like your cup of tea, or like not necessarily anything you're like not into creatively. You can still do that because you're still getting experience and you're still learning the industry, and like, you know, and like getting practice in. But also I think now, because social media is a thing, I think it's more important to be like, what are you showing you're doing? You know, if that makes sense. Like, what are you publicizing yourself doing? Because I think those are like, I don't know. I think that's helped me out the most, honestly. It's like not necessarily I've ever had an issue like because I shot a wedding or like because I did something that wasn't very cool. It's just like, well, what am I consistently giving to the people who are checking me out on socials or are checking me out on my website?
That is interesting, Kizzy. It's interesting that you say that. The reason I say that is because something that I say to creatives a lot is ensure that your portfolio is full of the work that you want to be hired for, not necessarily the work that you are hired for. And the reason I say that is that obviously typically when it comes to clients, they will come to you. For example, if you're having a wedding, you're going to search for a wedding photographer and you're going to make your decision based off the work that they've put on their socials or on their website, right? That's what you're going to base your decision off. There's no way you're going to approach someone who doesn't post about weddings to come and shoot your wedding. That doesn't seem logical.
Sorry.
That was brilliant, Alexis. I love that. What I was going to ask is that, do you agree with that sentiment, Jay? Do you agree that you should focus on putting out the work that you want to be hired for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really strong acknowledgement. And I'm a person that definitely believes in like, I guess, dream boarding, mood boarding, visualization in terms of setting goals and having achievements and taking necessary steps to be able to achieve those goals. And yeah, like testing, you know, when I first started out, I started testing with my equipment, shooting friends, and it was just portraits mainly. And then I noticed that I was getting hit up for doing like portfolio work and like maybe music artist press shots. But what I really wanted to do was more fashion. And I was like, why am I not getting booked for fashion? How can I get booked for fashion? And then it hit me. I was like, well, I need to get a stylist or a few stylists, collaborate with them, get some models, and then start testing and collaborating and seeing what sort of fashion editorials we can create, or even if it just means, you know, collaborating with a model who has a cool and sort of authentic style when it comes to wardrobe. And I can put together a look with location, with their styling, and with my equipment and my eye to make it look like I've shot a social campaign or a fashion campaign, and then put that stuff out there. So yeah, it's the most important thing, and it's not just photographers, it's for models as well. It's for anyone that does anything in the visual world, especially. If you can find ways of creating that visual, you know, with the resources that you have, people will definitely be attracted to it, and you'll have those experiences and be able to grow through it. And yeah, that's how you'll be able to attract that work. So 100%.
Well, thank you. I love that. Okay, Kirsty, obviously you are our resident expert as our head of bookings here at Contact. Do you agree with what Jay has shared?
I do. I completely agree. And I think in my experience, it was really interesting when I started being like more true to myself and sharing the work that I really liked instead of maybe sharing work, you know, that I was doing on a weekly basis for clients or work that I thought clients might want to see. That's when people started hiring me and being like, damn, I love that. I love that road trip you did with your friends. Like, I want you to recreate that for my brand. And that felt like much more of a kind of win for me and like much more in line with what I wanted to be doing. And also, this is maybe another thing that I wish I'd known when I was starting out, the kind of, not the illusion, well, we know social media is an illusion, but just that it's okay to post just what feels authentic to you. And looking at photographers you might really aspire to be, you can know that they probably have rafts of work that they're not sharing that doesn't feel as true to them, and not just be convinced that, you know, every campaign they do is their dream one. And that's something that I've learned in the past, and I think is quite a nice lesson that I've come to terms with.
I love that. That's so true. You have to make sure that whatever you're putting out there is authentically you, and it represents you, your skill, your passion, your interest, your capabilities. So 100% could not agree more. Okay, so let's move on to talk about some do's and don'ts. Some do's and don'ts of being on set as a photographer. Alexis, do you have some do's for us?
I have one very important one to me, and I think it will help anyone who listen to it. I think very important thing is you come in on a set and just come a bit earlier so you can like set the lighting, do your light test, do your all technicalities, and then you just focus on what you enjoy the most. So just being with your team and shooting. And the other thing, which is very important, is that you're not on your own. You have such responsibility for all atmosphere during the day. You work with stylists, you work with makeup artists. The model need to feel great on that day as well. And you keep that atmosphere going. If you fail, it literally is gonna show on photos, that's what happens. So it's not just you go in and take photos. You are a people person. You are working with your team, and that's very important on a set.
Very good one. Thank you so much, Kizzy.
Yeah, I think kind of in the same lines, like in terms of an exact thing to do, like I feel like a speaker is actually really handy. I always forget to bring a speaker, and then everyone's like, "Why are you just breathing hard?" It's like putting a speaker could definitely like fix the vibe a lot of the time. But also just like having a positive attitude the whole time, no matter what. Like, we talked about having to juggle way too many things as a photographer a lot of time, and it's really easy for me, like personally, honestly, to get in like almost a headspace where I'm like, you can tell how hard I'm trying, to like keep everything together. And honestly, my best shoots, it's like where you're having fun and you're making sure everyone else is comfortable and having fun, because you'll get the best out of a model if they're comfortable. You get the best out of like anyone assisting you if they're comfortable and they feel like they can ask and stuff. And so like if you can honestly just go in with the right headspace or bring the right headspace to everyone else, like your work will be way better. So
I love that. Create a good vibe, create a good atmosphere, so you can produce your best work. Love that. I think that's great advice. Jay, I would love to hear some don'ts from you. Some absolutely do not do this on set.
I mean, it's tricky. I guess it's down to like, as a person, your perspectives and awareness of the people around you, because the main thing is to consider, like Alexis said, you are always working with people. So the biggest don't, I would say, is don't disregard other people's feelings and thoughts, because like Alexis says, when you're working with other people and you want to get the best out of them, it's important to acknowledge how you can do that. So by acknowledging their feelings, acknowledging like the best ways of getting the best out of them is the most sort of vital way to go about your work. To give you examples, like, a lot of the time when you do like an outdoor shoot or sometimes indoors, it could be cold. And then you've got to consider that the model is having to pose and model for the images you're capturing for God knows how many hours, and they're going to be cold, and they're not going to necessarily want to be there, even though it could be the coolest campaign in the world, or they could be earning a lot of money from it or not. It's all about all these little factors to help the model be comfortable, to make sure that the stylist feels comfortable with the preparations and organizations and how you're capturing the clothes. Same with makeup artists and of course the clients, or if you're working with another director or something like that. So yeah, my biggest don't is don't disregard the people around you.
That's so beautiful. I love that. I love that. I love that. I think that's such sound advice for anybody, not just photographers. Any creative teams that you find yourself in, always consider the people around you. I think that's excellent advice. We actually had a question come in from our audience, and I love this question because it links really nicely into something that I have been curious about when it comes to photographers for the longest time. So we got a question from Max, and the question is, how do you overcome the disconnect between creative vision and reality? Now, the reason I love this question is because something I've been wondering about photographers. I'm like, how much input or like say do you guys have on the final outcome of a project? That's something I've always wondered about, because I'm like, obviously you can have like a brief and you can have like a director on set, but like you guys are actually behind the lens, so you are really doing, you're really doing the Lord's work, as it were. So thinking about a Max question in terms of how do you kind of overcome the disconnect between the creative vision and actually what comes out at the end? Do you guys actually have a say? Do you have an input in terms of what the final product is like? Alexis?
So that's a really good question. As a photographer, you act as a creative consultant. So you get an approach, you agreeing to do certain thing because you are happy to do this project. And the client usually has a vision for the brand. Sometimes it's set in stone and you can't do a lot. You just need to like execute this vision. That's your job. And sometimes it's like they want you working with you because of your work, your style, maybe your grading, your angles, and your thinking. And then they allow you to put some vision into their brand, but it just all depends. I think it's hard to say that you have a final say. I think it's more about collaboration between you and your client and making sure that everybody's happy. You can try to push the vision, but of course there are certain limits because it's their brand and it's what they want to do.
Interesting. Kirsty, is it true that photographers are creative consultants?
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. I think kind of going back to that question earlier, and we were talking about preparation and working with those clients to figure out, what's their end goal and how much do they want to work with you in terms of like figuring out how to do that for them. I think that's like a really cool, exciting stage of being a photographer, because you yourself get to scope out, how much of my creative input is necessary here. Like, do I just need to show up and press a button? And if that's the case, like a positive of that might be you get to connect with people. You maybe do a little bit, I don't know, you might learn a new technique. You might be able to put your own spin on it. Or on the other end of the spectrum, the client might completely trust you and say, I really appreciate your vision. Like, what can you bring to this, and how do you want to take it? And I guess those are the gold dust jobs, right? Where you have like complete creative reign. But I would say like most of the time it's somewhere in the middle, and having a variety of skills across that is only going to make you a better photographer.
Interesting. Okay, well, thank you for clearing that up for me. I think that's very, very insightful, especially because, like I said, I think photographers are the most creative minds. I mean, you guys can make something out of nothing, and I love that about you guys. Speaking about making something out of nothing, we've got to talk about AI, because that is the literal definition. And the reason, I'm super curious about your view or your take on AI is because obviously as a photographer, your job is to generate images. But these days we can go on a website and, type a few words in and have an image generated in a matter of seconds. So I'm really, really curious to kind of understand what your perception is of AI. Do you think it's a threat to the photography industry, Kizzy?
No, I don't. But like, if I was being honest, okay, so I don't know. So like at first, like I like to watch a lot of YouTube about stuff, and so I like to follow like the AI advancement stuff and like pay attention. But I haven't really understood it a lot, and I feel like my big thing with AI has been trying to not become like an old man about it. because like when everyone started posting AI like selfies, I was like, this is the worst thing, you know, right? But like I also have other photographer friends that like they also post AI work they've done, and like they actively understand it. And I think you can definitely strike a balance in like using it as a tool, you know, because like I bet like back in the day when someone's doing all their printing in the dark room and someone gets on Photoshop and they're like, you know, like they can't believe they did that, you know. And I think that's like how you look at it is important. I don't think it'll ever replace photographers because there is something to say about like real captured moments, you know, and that's like super special. So like if you can find a way to like use it and help your style, like sick. But it's not my cup of tea, being honest. But yeah, I don't think it's
That's very interesting. AI is a tool for photography. Interesting. I like that take. Jay, what about you?
I'm very much in alignment with what Kizzy just said, and I actually really appreciate your thoughts, Kizzy, on the fact that it's something I noticed but didn't actually think about, that how there is a way to use it as a tool if you're a photographer. Because in the moment you said that, I had flashbacks of seeing some people's work who I follow who are photographers. I'm like, actually, yeah, they actually used AI and found ways to create like series and concepts and editorials. And I had no idea how they did it because personally, I don't look into AI at all. But again, in alignment with what Kizzy said, I don't think it's gonna, take over the photographer's position, so to speak. I think it's either gonna be a thing where, well, especially not in our lifetimes, I hope, but I think it's either gonna be a thing where, like Kizzy said, you can utilize it as a tool, or there'll be even more of a need for that real authenticity. And the reason why I say that, also based on what Kizzy just said, but I started off in film, analog photography. And, when I started off in it quite a few years ago, I noticed there was this huge boom and resurgence of the need for analog photography. And, I had clients reaching out to me because they wanted everything to look analog. And I was just like, okay, cool. This is fun. This is interesting. But there's obviously a need for it. It's that rawness. It's the essence of capturing something that, new technology can't necessarily emulate. I mean, they've slowly started to emulate it now, but if you're well trained with it with your eye, you'd notice the difference.
You say that. I actually watched a video clip yesterday, and they literally had 4 different pieces of art. And 1 was original and 3 were made by AI, and they literally took all of them around and they were showing people in the high street, and literally less than 5% spotted like the real one. So I mean, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be intense to actually spot the real from the fake. But in all seriousness, I really do agree with you guys. I think AI should definitely be a tool. I don't see it as a threat because for me personally, photography, like I just don't think you can replicate in the same way that 2 human beings can't replicate the emotion that you feel through an image, the exact angle, the exact shot, the exact lighting. Like there's 2 human beings can't replicate that. So I don't see a machine being able to replicate that either. So I do agree. I think it should be a tool to enhance photography, not something that's working against it. Kirsty, will you be using AI in your photography, do you think?
Ooh, never say never, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't know. Who knows what the future of my photography will hold? But my photos at the moment are quite like, yeah, film, and I don't do much like in terms of post-production and like editing, Photoshop, that kind of thing. So but yeah, who knows? Never say never. And yeah, I'm trying like you said, Kizzy, to not be an old man about it and not be like completely terrified and grumpy, and actually think, yeah, this is cool. There's potential out here. Let's see what people do with it, and remain optimistic that like real creativity is always going to be part of being a human, right? So
Yes. Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. I'm really crossing all my fingers and toes for you guys. You guys figure it out. I'll just keep on oohing and eyeing at the amazing outcome. However you get there, I'm completely fine with it. We just had another really, really interesting question come through, and it is about mentorship. And I'm gonna link it to another question that I wanted to ask you guys, which is about agency representation. So thinking about agency representation or mentorship, do you think that's a good way to go, or is it more beneficial, as the question for Max here says, is it more beneficial to carve your own path through collaboration? So I know it's a bit of a heavy duty question there, but thinking about agency representation and then also just generally mentorship, do you think that is the way to go, or do you think it's more beneficial to pursue collaboration? Alexis, what do you think?
So in terms of the agency representation, when I went freelance, I've been on my own ever since. I know that some people are represented by agencies and they have mixed opinions. Sometimes it works for people, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people leave agencies, sometimes they come back to the agency, and it's all about what works for you. In terms of me, I'm pretty much, I think I get a lot of benefit for my brand to just approach brands I want to approach clients I want to work with. And I just have quite a freedom, but I don't know what will happen in the future in terms of, maybe I will be with the agency. You never know what I will end up with. I don't know. At the moment, it works for me. Yeah. And I think it's good to try yourself, and then if it doesn't work for you, try with the agency. Maybe that's a good answer.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Jay, mentorship, collaboration, agency representation, where do you lie on the scale of things?
I think it's always important to seek knowledge 100%. I'm self-taught in photography, and I definitely learned the hard way or the longer way in regards to learning about equipment, figuring out how I can take a good picture, be it through technology, acknowledging composition, whatever, what have you. But if there are people on your radar or people in your circles, or you see someone that you sort of respect and appreciate in your field, be it as a photographer or in any other kind of field that you're in, I would definitely communicate that it's important to reach out to people and to see if you can shadow them, see if you can learn from them, because you're only going to benefit from knowledge. Even if you end up figuring out that it's not the kind of role you want to be in, then at least you gain that knowledge and you can find another way to move forward in your journey or on your path. I mean, I don't have a definite answer as to like what I feel is better personally or for anyone else, but I think I would recommend doing both. I would recommend, being as collaborative as you can when you're starting out, so you can acknowledge what you want to get into. I think it's important to try things. I mean, I'm an actor, I'm a model, and I'm a photographer. Like, if I didn't try things, I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in now, So yeah, that's my views on that. In terms of agency, going back to what like Alexis said, I think I agree, and I think it's definitely down to like the type of person you are or type of photographer you are, and also in relation to the type of agency that you're with. I do know some agencies are very close-knit and they'll only put you up for specific jobs, and then anything outside of that you may not necessarily have the freedom or access to. So it depends on like if you have an agency that really understands you as a person as well as a creative, and they can facilitate making those client connections for you, or whether you just want that freedom to, do as you please.
Interesting. So it's about finding what works for you what you kind of align with in terms of your career path. But I think there's value in all of them. I think there's value in collaboration. I think there's value in mentorship, and there's definitely value in AT representation. You just have to find what works for you. I want us to quickly touch on finances. Because you guys are all creative freelancers, and right now money is on everybody's mind. It doesn't matter who you ask, money is on everybody's mind. So how do you guys kind of manage that? Is it easy to budget as a creative freelancer, as a photographer? Alexis is shaking her head. Tell me.
Well, I have a point here. So pretty much the invoices are a lot of times late. The jobs are booked last moment. I have like a story of my life. I went for holiday and I was like, oh yeah, my invoices will come when I'm there. And I had a lot of invoices coming in that chunk of time. I'm on my holiday and I'm finding out that I'm not gonna get any money. And I'm like abroad. I'm supposed to enjoy my time. So I asked my friend, borrowed money to have a nice holiday. And then when I landed, all my invoices just kind of came through. So I literally just transferred back. But my advice, save on a side to just have something if something like that happens, as well as when you have so winter, kind of January, February is like quite a period of time for freelancers. So you kind of have to have something on a side, definitely.
Thank you, Alexis. Invoices. The bane of my existence. Kirsty, you know all about invoices being late. So as a creative freelancer, what are your top tips for budgeting your finances?
Oh, top tips. I completely agree with what Alexis said about saving, and I think in my experience you're always going to need a bit more money than you think you're going to need. And if you're working for yourself, you don't get sick pay or whatever it might be, like insurance, things that might be perks that come with working for a company. So you need to kind of think about those things when you're planning your finances. Budgeting wise, not very good at that. But I would encourage everyone that if they are going down the freelance route, just to maximize your business expenses. If you're buying things to do with your job, then you can offset them on your tax bill at the end of the year. And yeah, maybe that's not actually a great budgeting tip because you're spending money, but it makes me feel a bit better knowing that I'm going to get it back.
I love that. I love the honesty. We love honesty. Jay, any advice?
I completely agree with what Kirsty and Alexis have just said. My main piece of advice for anyone who's freelance, actually, and it's interesting just because of like recently coming to the end of the previous tax year and seeing everyone's Instagram stories freaking out because they've got to do their taxes and not knowing what to do and being stressed and what have you. I would definitely recommend, it definitely depends on the position you're in, but when you start freelancing and you get into a space where you start getting regular work coming through, I would definitely recommend seeking either having an accountant that you go to, be it once like a year annually for when the tax year ends, or personally I have an accountant for monthly that oversees my finances monthly, and that relieves a lot of stress and a lot of pressure, and I'm able to text or WhatsApp them or email them at any time I want, obviously not in the middle of the night, but any day I want, just to seek some advice if I ever need it, or to go over certain things that I feel I'm unsure about when it comes to my finances, or as Kirsty said, offsetting expenses and stuff like that. You would be so surprised at how much money you can save once you have the knowledge. And usually the knowledge comes from an accountant.
Wow, I like that. Ask for help where and if you need it. It's so important. But not enough creative freelancers do it. We kind of bury our heads under the sand and just hope for the best. But you're absolutely right. And I mean, we need to take better control of our finances, especially because cash flow can be unpredictable from time to time, as you've rightly hinted at. So it's really, really important that we do try to plan as best as possible. I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh my gosh, where has the time gone? We've been talking for almost an hour and it doesn't even feel like it. But before we go, I think, I've asked you a lot of direct questions, but it would be nice for you guys to share anything that you haven't had the opportunity to share so far. So what would you guys say are your top tips for aspiring photographers out there? What is, some advice that you would want them to know? Alexis.
So for me, I would come back what Jay said. Testing goes like long way. I would say this is very important because you can find your style. You can meet people that they can lead you to certain jobs in the industry, and just overall testing and posting and showing what you're about. That's very important, and you learn with every shoot. The more you shoot, the more you like. The better you get, and I think that's crucial. Even if you're busy as a freelancer, find this weekend or any time you can express yourself like truly. And also don't be guided by your ego in terms of sometimes it's nice to work on a smaller jobs, like you can assist some photographer and then you can meet right people. You literally never know.
I love that. That's brilliant bundles of advice there. Over to Kizzy now in sunny/snowy Utah. What are your top tips for aspiring photographers out there?
Well, like I feel like this won't sound like a tip, but like time, honestly. And like we touched on like Instagram not being real, and I had a hard time when I was first starting, not like feeling like I was at the level I wanted to be. But everything's just time. Like it's like just consistency will do way more than you just like trying to rush, burn yourself out, and then being dead for a few months and then popping back up and being dead. And like I faced that with some things, like with my last short film. Because back to budgeting and all that, blew all my money, went into debt because of that, and I stopped doing photography for like easily like 7 months. And so then I had other clients hit me up and like, oh, what is up? It's like you were going consistent and what happened. And I think there's a lot comes from just being consistent and keeping yourself in people's radar and just doing your tests, staying out there, stay posting, and not worrying about some big job coming around and whisking you into being like the most famous photographer. But like, just don't worry. It should take years. It shouldn't be like 1 month kind of thing,
I love that. Consistency is key because you never know who is watching. That is such sound advice, Kizzy. Kirsty, what's your advice for aspiring photographers out there?
So first, I have to agree. I think testing, shooting as much as possible is the key. You might think your work is really bad, but the only way it's going to get better is just by doing it over and over again until you like it. And also, like, remember to have fun, because sometimes, working as a creative isn't fun and you might get in a bit of a rut with that. But yeah, try and bring yourself back to like your headspace that you maybe were in the earlier days when everything was like fun and new and experimental, and try and like bring yourself back to that kind of vibe by whatever means you need to.
Perfect. Love that. Great advice. Keep it fun. You guys are creatives. Have fun with it. I love it. That's some amazing advice. Jay?
I completely agree with everything that everyone's just said in terms of advice. Proper spot on. I would say if there's anything I could add to it, don't be afraid to reach out to people. Like I said before, it's important to connect with people and to learn from others. I think that's the best way you can go about acknowledging your work. I think it's important to be open and reach out so that you can make connections, because you'll be so surprised at you know, even just the friendships that you can make, let alone any kind of acquaintances or working relationships. I remember when I started out and I was first just reaching out to models, testing, I would come across loads of models on Instagram, be it through looking at agencies or just like, you know, checking out other people's work. And then I would kind of be a little bit intimidated when I saw a model that I really wanted to shoot, but they had thousands and thousands of followers. And I'll be like, oh, I can't message them. They're not ever going to like respond to me or whatever. But one day I just thought, you know what, let me just message and see what happens. And then eventually I kind of found that there were a few people that were really interested and we had a mutual understanding. And now some of them are people that I connect with to this day. And, you know, sometimes I'm fortunate enough to be able to work with them as well as collaborate and test with them. So yeah, reaching out to people is, I guess, one of my biggest tips.
Amazing. Networking is so important as any sort of creative. Knowing how to network, reach out, put yourself out there is just quality advice, and it's such a great note to end on. Guys, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everything that you've shared. I have learned so much about photography that I was not aware of, so thank you so much. And I know that if that's the case for me, then that's definitely the case for those who are listening at home. So thank you guys so much again, like I said, for your time. If you want to find out more resources, more information, then do please keep in touch with Contact for more guidance about how to become a successful creative freelancer. So to my wonderful panelists, thank you guys for spending your time. And I really do hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. And to those listening, thank you guys again. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, guys. Good night.
Thanks. It was great.